Hello, everyone. Welcome back to BizCon. I want to especially welcome our special guest, Advit Nath. We will talk about um, a bit about his role and where his background comes from, and also what he's doing at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. It's a mouthful. We're just going to call it IFAD. Um, my name is Sandra Rowe. I'm the CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, or better known as the GBBC. And I'm just delighted here to be able to spend some time with Advit to understand better what is IFAD and what are some of the United Nations programs and activities that are related to blockchain and beyond in emerging tech as we go. And hopefully we'll be able to get some questions in from the audience. So please help us to participate and feel free to ask. But I'm going to turn it over to Advit. I want to say thank you for joining us from Rome at midnight. So special thank you. Please, could you start us off by just letting us know, what do you do over at IFAD? And you've had an illustrious career across different parts of the UN. Just unpack the UN for the average layperson, because it is a beast of an organization. It's doing great stuff all over the world.
Well, thanks so much, Sandra. And indeed, it's just such an exciting topic that I'm here at midnight in Rome to be at this Wyoming hackathon. So thanks so much for the invitation and looking forward to it. Yeah, so what do I do? I'm the financial control and director at IFAD. We are in Rome. However, we have about 200 projects that are ongoing in about 140 countries that are worth about $8 billion. So we operate around the world, even though we have a presence in Rome. And we do everything to support farmers, small-scale farmers. That's our focus on irrigation, gaining access to finance, improving land management, training, crops, livestock production, and technology and rural infrastructure, and of course, climate, which is important for farmers to try and cope with. So in terms of IFAD, I mean, we are really focused on that bottom billion, we call it, the poorest people who live on less than $2 a day and live in rural areas. And IFAD is a very unique organization in the UN sort of system. We are a United Nations entity, but also an international financial institution. And we have over 40 years of experience. And we have supported over $22 billion in projects, in grants, and also low-income, low-interest loans to smallholder farmers, which is our main focus. And smallholder, we define that as farmers that have 1 to 2 hectares or 2.5 to 5 acres of land. And we reach about 500 million people as well. So the issue we have is that, look, there's growing inequality around the world. We know this. The difference between rich and poor is getting much more dramatic. Competition for scarce resources is there. And our focus is to go where hunger is deepest, in the rural areas. We know that agriculture is proven to be an engine for poverty reduction. Economic growth in agriculture releases 2 to 3 times more effective poverty reduction and food insecurity than growth in other sectors. So what's important? We focus on food supply. We know that lower food prices are going up. We know that employment is an issue. So we want to try and build high incomes for farmers, and that drives consumption. And there's a multiplier effect there as well. So while we deliver projects, we also promote gender equality, resilience to climate. Women are major contributors to agriculture, as we know, in rural economies, yet they have significantly less access than men to services and markets and assets, and including land. So that's one of our big areas as well. And our one focus is really to focus on transforming rural economies and food systems. And our projects are really there to provide access to finance and markets and technology and information so that rural people can lift themselves out of poverty.
Great. I really appreciate that overview. And you mentioned a lot of things here. So maybe if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to some of the things that you mentioned and we can dig a little bit deeper. So, IFAD, we'll say it properly now, it actually, it's an interesting hybrid because you've said it's both a financial institution and it's part of the UN. So its mission is like almost financier to the farmers of small farmers of the world, but also it's got this UN backing with resources that are 8 billion is a lot of assets. When you think about right now, how much has changed? Because we're also hearing, and I heard this from the World Food Program, that there are already a significant number of people who are food insecure. And now that number is just going to explode, not only because of the pandemic, there's locusts, issues and all sorts of horrible things are happening to different farmers, particularly like sub-Saharan Africa. Could you tell us a little bit how much has shifted since, let's say, earlier this year? And have you had to shift your mission as well, or your focus?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sandra. So we're part of the international community, and we're anchored also to support the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, no poverty, zero hunger, which is the one we're focused on, gender equality, clean water, quality education, climate, and others. We know the challenge, even before COVID, was that the population of the world currently 7.8 billion as of September 2020. That's the number of people in the world. And in 10 years, the projections are that that number will go to 8.5 billion by 2030 when we're supposed to achieve those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's a 10% increase of people to feed and everything that surrounds that and what's needed to feed people. And also just allow people to live in dignity. There was a UN report recently released that COVID has reversed decades of progress on poverty, healthcare, education, and that it'll push between 70 to 100 million people back into extreme poverty in 2020. So that's because of lost incomes, no social protections, rising prices for goods and basic goods to survive on. So even those who were secure before are now finding that they could be at risk of poverty and hunger. So we know that recently, in particular, this COVID pandemic has really caused a dramatic shift back and step back for a lot of the poorest people in the world and people who were doing better but have now shifted back into poverty. So what did IFAD and a bunch of the other UN actors and others do? So we really did have to refocus. I mean, we repurposed about $200 million of projects that were ongoing because towards COVID-specific support, there were projects on a little bit more development and agricultural development, and now we refocused it based on the government and governments that we work with, their priorities. If it was needing to focus straight on healthcare, we supported that as well. So I think what we had to do was repurpose and refocus ourselves. I mean, one thing that's quite beneficial of being that nexus I mentioned earlier, of being an international financial institution as well as UN agencies, that we have access to finance that other UN agencies don't. The traditional UN agency model is receiving grant resources from donors, so mostly governments around the world, but also some multilaterals. And that funding, that grant funding comes in from the donor and essentially goes out to support poverty reduction programs. But IFAD, what IFAD does is we borrow resources as well. We also are now being rated by credit rating agencies. So we're very similar in that regard to the World Bank and the other regional development banks. So we have that approach where we can borrow funding and exponentially increase our balance sheet. So we have a lot more resources, so we can on-lend or provide grants to the poorest countries and farmers ultimately. And the goal of being that sort of financial institution, as well as the UN agencies, that we, in a democratic way, we have no objectives of reduction. We don't make profit. We don't have any support for any particular governments. We're supposed to treat every government equally. We have one mandate, which is support the poorest people. So if you can catalyze finance and move it from the billions to trillions, because the UN system is 50 billion a year in spending, and we're 1 billion of that per year, even though we have the 8 billion ongoing projects. 50 billion of funds go to aid programs in the UN system alone. And we are able to increase our balance sheet quite significantly by these new means of finance that we can obtain at very cheap prices, because if we're rated very highly through a credit rating agency, we can borrow very cheaply. And if we can borrow cheaply, we can on-lend even more cheaply for the poorest farmers in the world.
I was asking maybe the obvious, which is, are you seeing lots more countries asking for larger loans for support? And do you see that just continuing to spike through the end of the year?
So we've been tracking this very closely from when the pandemic hit, and it obviously different countries at different times. But from January onwards, we were nervous because we know more countries going into poverty and struggling with the pandemic, focusing on healthcare first, and then of course development and other things second. We had loans outstanding that we at very cheap interest rates, almost zero, and we were wondering if we would have any challenges by those countries, and of course find ways to support those countries even more. What we found was there was some delays in some countries meeting some of their obligations, and we gave them more flexibility. Of course, that's part of our mandate, is to support the poorest countries. So what we started seeing is more just countries moving more into the debt distress side of things. It hasn't blown up into a significant situation so far. I think countries are resilient. I think the support that's been provided not only by the international community, but also by central banks and nationally, I think has been critical. So a lot of the liquidity and other support that's been provided has been critical. And then the flexibility by creditors also was very, very important. The Paris Club and bilateral donors were told to suspend debt repayments from poor countries at least till the end of the year, and all of them have done that. So that's really a great success for the international community and countries to come together to say, look, we need to support the poorest countries. Let's allow them at least some leeway in terms of at least a year or so to come back and support and be able to pay their debts. So this has happened. And I think that was one additional way that the countries were supported, in addition to all the projects that are ongoing. And we're now ramping up a lot of projects. To your question, whether there's more demand for finance, there is. And that's why we're scaling up our activities. We're raising more funding so that we can provide a significant amount of funding. We've created this new rural stimulus facility mechanism where we're trying to raise, we've raised quite a lot already, around 50 million, and we're going right to 200 million. And I think what we're trying to do is get more finance to immediately push some liquidity to farmers, to countries, to allow them to stay afloat. Because the pandemic is continuing, and there could be second waves and third waves, and this is what we're hoping is we can do our part as the international community and the United Nations to support these countries in every possible way we can, given it's very difficult as we all understand.
Yeah, no, all the work that you are doing. I have a question around technology then, and how that plays into the current situation with that backdrop. Does technology then take a back seat, or how do you try to make sure that there's innovation also going on when you're dealing with some real big issues and demands for obviously immediate action on certain, things on fire right now? How do you balance that? What role does technology have to play?
Well, Sandra, I think what was really helpful during this crisis that we were all in is that every one of us used technology to a very large extent, and we were in lockdown. I think no country around the world of the 205 countries was spared in this pandemic. So if you think of every single country, every single person who had access to technology, and there's a large population that doesn't, but those that did were using technology. And I think that made it real for all of us. That made it, I have to be honest, we thought it wouldn't work that well. But in all honesty, it worked extremely well from our perspective. Just looking at our little ecosystem of EFAD, for example, we're 600 people, and we were able to connect through the technology, through Zoom and other means. And we realized how powerful technology is, a lot more than we thought, just from that experience in itself. So then how does that relate to countries and supporting the people we support? I think to the contrary, it actually has increased, and our interest and our sort of belief in technology has doubled or tripled, and not only just at the level where of those technology literate, but right to the top of the organization, to the CEO, to everyone in the organization. So I think what I've seen in our organization, as an example, is that we went through, we added a lot of flexibility measures during COVID. We, for example, we started using remote monitoring of our projects, because we work in around the world, in every continent practically. And we were physically going to projects to see that they were on track. We supported them, technical assistance. And then what we had to do is that we had to use other means to check on projects, cameras, drones, and other things. And then we stopped paper. We did get some requests, even though we have portals for borrowers to request loans and grants 24/7. We still have some countries that were on paper and had to request funding and proof that they spent expenditures through paper. But then when mail systems stopped working, and there's no one in our office to pick up the mail either and check what was requested, it made it very difficult. So we added these flexibility measures. Of course, we had to make sure that the controls were in place, because one thing is very important is also a lot of the money we get is from taxpayer money from around the world, from countries that donate to us. And we have to make sure that we spend the money extremely prudently, and that we have the receipts always, as we say. And in that case, we had to ensure that we spent the money, we spent the money with all the receipts in place. And I think using technology in that way was very helpful for us. So I think what we found is that mechanism of flexibility we're making permanent now, a lot of those mechanisms, and we're adding other layers of checks and balances, but we're making a lot of those permanent. And then I think we have also expedited because of COVID showed that that humans can be fallible, that we won't be able to go to work, we don't go physically. So we actually have expedited our robotics program, for example, where we are trying to business process re-engineer a lot of processes. It doesn't mean we're making people redundant, we're just shifting them into new areas and do more analytics, do more about technical analysis, the more thinking, whereas robots can do. And these are physical robots. These are robotic process automation projects. So we've really expedited that project, and we're moving very fast on various different technology fronts in that realm. And I think a lot of other organizations thinking that I say this, that robots can't get COVID, so you always have a backup plan if, let's say, you're in a situation with a pandemic that we've seen.
Yeah. Very true. And frankly, based on what some of the experts are saying, that we could see more pandemic-like scenarios in the future, it's worth an investment in. If I may turn your attention to blockchain specifically, we'd love to get your thoughts around any blockchain projects or initiatives that have come up and your thoughts around those.
Sure, Sandra. Let me give you a little perspective on some of the projects in the UN system, and then I can come to a project that we're working on as well in EFAD. I know the UN system is working on blockchain, various different means of using blockchain, because I'm a big believer in blockchain. I'm in finance, and that's, to me, a blockchain is a ledger at its core. And it has so many elements of it, as we know, that just make it so special compared to the books and paper and even systems we use and technology we use in terms of computer technology, ERPs, enterprise resource planning systems. So I'm a big believer of blockchain. And I think the UN system is now starting to get very excited about blockchain. And because of the ability to not only use it in our own areas and organizations, but the ability to share across the system, we have about 40 different entities in the UN system. And that's a lot of entities that have a lot of different processes and systems. And can you imagine for the poor farmer who has to deal with 40 different agencies and all their different requirements? That becomes very difficult and tricky. So what we're trying to do is explore and coordinate as much as possible how we can leverage blockchain applications so that way it can be used by each individual organization, but also so that we can share it and ultimately be more beneficial to the end user that we are trying to support and help. Just a few examples of some projects that I'm familiar with that are there, and these are all run by the different UN agencies, but there's a lot of sharing of information, so I'm familiar with some of these. One is an interesting project on tracking of land ownership in Afghanistan by UN Habitat. So that project, again, poor individuals can track their ownership. Before, it used to be in archaic government files sitting in the capital, which could be hundreds of miles away from their physical location. So this project is quite interesting and a simple use of blockchain, but quite a powerful use as well. There's a World Food Program, which tracks the movement of goods between countries to try and improve supply chains. So that reduces the time to ship goods, and they have one project of shipping goods between Djibouti and Ethiopia, which I think currently takes about 20 days to do, and they're expecting that it could reduce down to 3 to 5 days. Wow. So that's another interesting project.
Yeah, that's a
huge difference. Yeah, and there's a couple of more. There's UN Women and WFP have teamed up, and they're doing a project in the refugee camps where they track entitlements given to refugees, so cash entitlements, and especially important because it ensures women get the benefits, because many times women are left out when there's when situations that are difficult and there's no tracking or a third-party arbitrator to see that things go the right way. There's also an interesting project that WFP linked up with the UNHCR, that's the refugee agency of the UN, where they have a big database of biometric data on refugees that they securely manage and keep. And what they've done is through the blockchain, they're able to share that data with the World Food Program. So the World Food Program knows who are the authenticated refugees because the refugee agency determines who are legitimate refugees. Through the data, then the World Food Program gives food to those refugees through but also very interesting means where they allow access to tokens and other even access to banking systems through that. And it's helping about 100,000 Syrian refugees at this point, that very program. UNDP has another interesting one, which I think when someone buys a chocolate bar in various countries around the world, and I think it's a pilot now, the idea is that that person who buys that chocolate bar gets a token. And that token can be sent by that purchaser, UI, sent straight to the farmer in Ecuador. And then when that farmer gets 4 tokens, that means a new cocoa tree can be planted. So it's again a very innovative way to allow individuals to support farmers. UNICEF has a crypto fund, so donations come straight to UNICEF in Bitcoin or Ether. They have set up, I think, with 17 plus suppliers in certain countries, and those suppliers accept the cryptocurrency to build schools for children. So it's a really, again, another use case of how blockchain has worked in various UN agencies. And then we have one project as well that's just starting up. So I'll stop here and ask if you have any more questions there, and then I can go into our project.
Well, I mean, first of all, I have one comment, which is just the breadth and depth of some of the projects that you've mentioned. You've talked about identity verification, which then leads to payments and allowing people to get access to whether it's food or sources of funding quickly. And then there's ways of helping women, the land tracking. I mean, it's just amazing. I don't think people understand or maybe value, and I think we all should, how much the United Nations is doing. And frankly, NGOs in general are also some of the trailblazer pioneers adopting this technology. And I think that's often not acknowledged enough that there's some really amazing applications going on. Um, but further to that, I'd love to hear about what IFAD is up to.
Thanks, Sandra. I mean, I think we're scratching the surface, if we even have. And as you said, we're really so, there are so many use cases in the development space and humanitarian space that have really not been tapped. So I think it's really good that I think it's about 15 UN agencies are doing one project or another in this space. And I think we need to ramp that up. And I think we need to collaborate and coordinate a lot more, which is happening in a big way with the new Secretary General's sort of mandate on UN coordination. So I think we are moving in the right direction. I think we can learn from the NGO, the private sector, and all the applications that are already there in the world, and see how can we use that technology for development. And I think that's something that's really not tapped in to yet. And I really encourage, that's why I love these hackathons and other, because I think that a lot of young people are getting engaged and involved. And just seeing some of the projects is really fascinating for me as well. And I think we need to encourage this as much as possible. So I really do commend the organizers for this interest and this area, and to put platforms for the development side as well, not just the for-profit use cases, but also for the non-profit use cases. So let me tell you a little bit about our project in IFAD. So we're really excited about this project. It's still in the pilot phase, so we're learning, and we haven't got it quite perfectly set up yet. But we also have to give credit to a lot of support we've had. We've engaged Ernst & Young, who are really trailblazing a lot of the thinking, because we are very unique, and each entity has to sort of fit the solution to their unique needs and the needs of their beneficiaries in the end. You can't just cut and paste and apply a solution. So our project is really about the traceability of funds. So when the funds come in, right to when it reaches the farmer. I'll tell you what we do now. And now we've moved. We used to be on a paper-based system, at least I should say, 7 years ago or so. And we moved to a client portal system, which is a web-based platform where farmers, governments can log on with authenticated user rights. They would then go through a bunch of screens where they have to upload certain data, information, validate, and then request once they're authenticated, and we've signed project agreements, etc., which is all offline as well. So then there's paper as well there. They would then be set up, and they could request loans and grants from the system 24/7, and it's quite a unique system. It's internet banking for farmers and borrowers and governments 24/7. So it was nice. It lacked certain things. And what it lacked was the ability to really know where the money is going from beginning to end. And our donors have been asking this as well. They've been saying, look, we give you a lot of money. We know you have a lot of assurance mechanisms in place, and you do a lot of monitoring, you check, you have checks and balances, you make sure the money goes to the places. And we do that to the extent we can right now. And we obviously, we cannot. That doesn't mean it's 100% checking. It means we do a monitoring mission a year or two. We do a lot of other checks as well. When we get the requests, we do various checks. However, donors say a few things. They say, one, we're not able to follow the dollar to the end. So what you're telling us is good to the extent your systems capture it. And our systems currently capture the money coming in. So we have an Oracle PeopleSoft system. The money comes in, it gets recorded in the system. Then the money goes out, and it goes out to the first recipient. So if we give money to a certain government A, we show that the money went to government A. Now, if that government gave the funds to another 10 counterparties or project recipients or subcontractors to do work in agricultural development and other areas, then we lose that traceability and that auditability and that visibility. We don't know which 10 they are. We don't know what compliance, what kind of management they have, how are they using those funds. Yes, they have to prove at the end that they've spent the money properly, but it's also it's on a traditional means of showing us finance, how it's spent. It's spent on travel, on salaries and wages, on building materials. So it's a traditional way of looking at things. So what we're trying to do is trace this down to know those 10 counterparties. Know exactly, they'll be connected to the system, and know exactly how they operate and when the money leaves their entities and goes to the beneficiary, and then validate with the beneficiary that they've received the value that they were supposed to receive. So I think the goal there is traceability for the donor. So the donors right now see sort of this line item on our financial reporting to them, which they don't like. It says amount to the first level beneficiary, and it's sort of, and then there's the other category, because whoever it went to is not reported. It's a lump sum of money that went to these other 10 entities in my example. And so now what we're trying to do is tell the donor, and what happens with some donors, which we're getting stricter because their taxpayers are asking for more accountability and transparency, they are telling us we're not going to accept though that money was spent appropriately if you don't tell us exactly where it went. So we're now struggling with some donors to say who are denying that expenditure, and they're telling us that you need to tell us a lot more clearly where that money is going for us to allow us to use taxpayer money on it. And so that's, again, so it's a traceability is one big area, and donor confidence, because it proves beyond reasonable doubt absolutely that the money went to the end beneficiary. So that's one big area that it helps with. And the idea is that we would have a private blockchain right now, and it's through the Ethereum platform. The idea is also that we have all the partners continue to use the existing systems. So it doesn't mean we all have to have a massive capital expenditure to change to one corporate system that these sort of many ecosystem partners have to use. We're just saying, use your same systems. You just have what's called an API, which is a connection straight to the blockchain. So that also alleviates the concerns of safety of data. So if a government doesn't want to put their farmers, citizens' data on some centralized blockchain that they don't know who has access to, they don't have to. The blockchain that's hashes, basically the data is all hashed and it's all secure, it goes up. But they don't have to move their servers to another place. They keep their servers in secure locations in their countries if that's where they are. And that's also from a data confidentiality perspective, that's really perfect for each of the partners. So data confidentiality is assured through this mechanism. There's a lot of data in one place in the blockchain, because before you had the government that gave us money would have the data that they gave in their system, not anywhere else. So they would now upload some of the data that they are fine to upload to the blockchain. When we receive the funding, we can upload the data we are comfortable uploading, and we're fully transparent, so we're happy to upload the data. The next government who receives it, if it's a government or an NGO or a partner, they would then connect up to the blockchain. And so each partner in that chain connects to the blockchain, and we keep our secure systems under the firewall, behind the firewall, as they currently are. And the blockchain has certain data that's hashed and protected. It's through a virtual private blockchain. So just like a VPN, it's a VPB. And that way it's a very secure mechanism. And each of the parties to this blockchain will validate the transactions that are there. So from that perspective, there's the validation, there's the confidentialities, there's the traceability, there's the confirmation of results. And I think that's another very interesting area where we currently don't really capture all the results and all the dimensions we want. So that's where we're doing more here, where We can have iPads with the farmers and tell them, what were the different dimensions? Which SDGs did you feel this was achieved? Did it really help reduce hunger? Did it help increase incomes? Did it help in gender? And then they can rate those areas, and we can get real-time feedback that goes straight to the blockchain. And then we have a lot more data to do analysis and to improve our services and to improve the lives of the people we're trying to support in the end. So that's just in a nutshell some of the ideas around the idea of traceability of disbursements that we're starting to work on. And so far it's exciting because also each partner has an app on their phones, and they can see the fund aspects that they are most interested in. So you have that ability also to have very different reporting for each different partner in the process.
That's fantastic. And I have to say, I wouldn't have talked to the consortia we just joined, like funds tracking. It's not exactly the same, but it's related. The EU is focusing on for the new Green Deal initiative. And I do recall I was in Australia with the senator. And he specifically said, and this is something where he thought blockchain would actually play a really significant role. He said there is a gap between perception of Australian citizens of how much foreign aid goes out of the coffers versus the reality. And it's always those citizens thinking there's more going out and there's more corruption and money just going everywhere, leaking, than reality. And he said, I would love if there was a way for us to have a ledger that would prove that foreign aid has gone out and it's actually been beneficial, and therefore get citizens to understand with that transparency that they should be supporting those abroad. So hopefully that will happen.
Absolutely, and I think this is good for development, because if we can, and I think the 50 billion the UN spends a year on development and humanitarian aid, there's a perception gap there, and there's a lot of talk, and if you don't prove it that you've spent it properly, the onus is really on people to think that you haven't. And I think this is one way, and I know the vast majority of that money does go to a lot of projects, because we monitor them, we see them, and now with the technology you can see them almost with this type of blockchain process. You can see it, I won't say real time, but it's almost real time, because so you can see, and you can then prevent issues much quicker. If you see some things where you can actually enforce business rules, that's another very interesting area that we will venturing into on smart contracts and other business rules, where you could say that we want to know when there's a trigger of a spend on IT that's beyond a certain threshold of 10% of the total project, if that's one of the conditions, let's say, then that would trigger immediately a warning message through the blockchain. Right now, this could take months or years even, or a year plus, to know, because you wait for the mission to go happen in that remote village somewhere, and then only then will you know where the issue is. So to me, the importance of transparency of international aid is critical for just to help also get more aid, and then support the people we need to support much more effectively that way. So I think this idea of smart contracts is another one that we're exploring quite heavily and moving into, where we could have vendors, small vendors, who would be able to provide some aid or build some aspect of the project in agriculture to sign on through the app, and they can sign on and they get validated, and then once we know through track records, and we can rate the vendors over time. Once they're rated and they seem to be reliable vendors, then we can build business rules through smart contracts on the blockchain, where we could make payments to them quite quickly without having to go through extra checks and balances and extra validations. So that is another layer of automation and speed to get the money down to the partners that are there to help us achieve the objectives for the poorest. So to me, that aspect of smart contracts, and you can add more complicated layers. Let's say you don't know vendors, or you want to add more checks to certain vendors. you can again build the smart contracts directly against those vendors, and then they'll have to jump through more hoops to be able to get the funding. And then we can validate, let's say, through the normal sort of fiat currency mechanism through the banks to say, once the banks move the money and the EFT, the transfer of funds has happened in the banking world of cash that we know it, then only will the blockchain allow and the smart contract allow the vendor to move forward with the next phase of the project. So that's another very exciting area that I think we are building into this project as our next phase, and we expect it to really smooth out a lot of processes we currently have as well. And I think that the bigger picture here now, I know we're talking about a private Ethereum network, but in 5 to 7 years, what we're looking at is to have this on a public Ethereum blockchain, where we don't have any centralization. This is it's again protected because it's all hashed. There's no real transactions that you can decipher in the blockchain, even if it's a public blockchain. So and the idea is that this technology should be a public good, and we should be able to have this traceability of funds from donors on a public blockchain. And that is our real sort of the ultimate goal, I think, in the next 5 years or so. Once we get the private one working and validated, and see that there's trust built amongst the few people in the blockchain, then we would expand this out in the long run. And I think there's huge potential here for collaboration across the various actors in the international community as well, and not just amongst UN, but also UN across NGOs, across bilateral donors. It's phenomenal what could happen. I think the potential is huge.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. Last minute, Advit, what advice do you have for budding entrepreneurs who are getting when they
I'm very excited for entrepreneurs who would like to do something in the development space. I think just reach out to us, reach out to the UN entities. I think we have a lot of opportunity and scope to fund, to support some of these new ideas. And I think there's a lot of great ideas out there. I'm just seeing some of the things that are happening in this hackathon is really exciting. And I just think in terms of advice, I think just follow this. This is the blockchain is the future. There's no question in my mind that it is a robust technology that will stay. I know cryptocurrency is still something that we need to think on, and I know that we're not there yet in terms of really the full trust there. But I think blockchain is really, and with the use case scenarios which are very low risk, I think we can definitely leverage any ideas, and we would really support any of these innovative ideas. So I encourage all young people, all those who would like to get involved in the development space and make a difference in the world. You can use your skills and your minds to really change the world. And there's so many different use cases that you could that we haven't even thought about. I think 99% of the use cases haven't even been thought about yet in this space. So I think there's a lot of potential and excitement to get that sort of tried and tested, and we'll support you. I'm sure there's a lot of there's innovation labs. There's a lot of programs. Join them, participate. You can even make win some prizes in some of them. So we really do encourage that.
Well, thank you. I have to say it's been a wonderful, well, more than 40 minutes chatting with you. We could go on for hours, but I realize it's very late your time. Do you have any parting words in general around where we are with, the current state of affairs? How can the average citizen, is it awareness? Is it being, I think we should all be kinder to each other, but what can the average person do to help support? Because I think sometimes the feeling is that they're of powerlessness, of not being able to do much when there's so much like macro, big systemic issues that are happening. Do you have any advice for the general audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I think that we're all global citizens. I think we all have to hold our governments to account to support efforts on climate, on all the different mandates, the SDGs, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I think we all just have that. I think if we can all do our part to just support, making sure, holding our governments to account, and making sure that we all support the poorest people. We have an obligation. We have it in our power to make a difference in this world. And so if we use our vote, if we use our minds to do that, I think the world will be a better place for everyone. So awareness is one thing, and then action is really more important. And I think wherever we think we may feel powerless in many situations, but we really aren't. And I think we can just make a little difference in as much as we can do individually and holistically. When you think of every single person doing a little bit more, then we could shift mountains. So yeah, that's my advice, and something I also try to remember all the time. And thank you so much, Sandra, for moderating the session. And it really was a pleasure speaking with you. And you do some great work. I've seen your organization also does some fantastic work. So I'm very excited to learn more.
Well, thank you very much. Couldn't have better advice. Speak up, hold your governments accountable, vote. You do have a voice. And as a collective, I believe in people power as well. If we all get together and move in one direction, we can do amazing things. Thank you, Advit Nath from IFAD, and I hand it back over to our host today. Thank you.
Thank you.